In 1999 in Albert Hall, London, during the celebration of 300 years of the Khalsa Panth, which is the martial manifestation of the Sikhs as described by the 10th Guru, His Royal Highness Prince Charles said during his address, "I have come to know your community over many years, both in Britain and India, and I well remember Amritsar back in 1980. In fact, I have particular memories of this occasion when a large crowd of friendly and welcoming turbaned Sikhs carried me bodily off my feet around the entire precinct of the Golden Temple. I have also developed a great respect over the years for many individual Sikhs, starting, I may say, with whom I once played polo in Jaipur. They wear their turbans throughout, and me wearing a much stronger helmet. So my admiration for the Sikhs grew by leaps and bounds on that occasion." On another occasion, Prince Charles paid a major tribute to the British Sikhs when he opened an exhibition of Sikh art at Victoria and Albert Museum, London. He said, "Central to Sikhism are spiritual values of great significance and the ideals of equality, tolerance and compassion that are fundamental to our own life in modern multicultural Britain. Britain owes an enormous debt to the Sikhs, particularly to their contribution to the British Indian Army and to the British Army in 2 world wars. General Sir Frank Messervy, in his memoirs, writes, "Finally, we that live can never forget these comrades who, in giving their lives, gave so much that is good to the story of the Sikh regiment. No living glory can transcend their supreme sacrifice in the last 2 world wars. 83,005 turban-wearing Sikh soldiers were killed and 109,045 were wounded. They all died or were wounded for the freedom of Britain and the world during shell fire with no other protection but the turban, the symbol of their faith. Why I wear a turban? Everyone at the time of his birth or her birth is a human being rather than a Sikh, Christian or Jew. It is society that gives child a religion, which at that time is family tradition rather than a faith. Similarly, in my case, I was born into a Sikh family and baptized in this faith, which I have continued to follow during my lifetime. I do not say the same for some of my generation, and positively not for offsprings of my generation. Basically, this remark only applies to those in Western countries. There is an optional baptism at the age of understanding, which is called an absolute baptism. This makes the follower very devout. However, I have not partaken in this ceremony because of my fear of not being able to strictly keep up to the codes of practice. I tie my turban every morning after a wash and shower, and after dressing my hair and beard. My turban is 5 yards long, 1 yard wide of finely woven cotton. It is washed every week, styled and folded in readiness for tying. It usually takes 2 minutes to tie it on. The Sikhs have different styles for their own liking. Mine could be more of an Indian Air Force style. The turban is kept on until I retire to bed. It is considered disrespectful for a Sikh to meet visitors or callers without having his turban on his head or some sort of covering. Family members are exempt. The color of the turban and its shape when tied are a matter of personal preference. Except for the armed forces, the army uniform color is khaki, the Air Force color is blue, the Navy color is white. Generally, the Sikhs from East African countries are recognized by their white turbans, whereas those from India invariably wear colored. Some wear black due to environmental surroundings, yet some choose the color to match their dress. Now I wish to relate a few items strictly in great humility. Turban Sikhs have excelled in many spheres in their lives. In the 1920s and 30s, they produced the best athletes and wrestlers in India. In Kenya, where I was born, Turban Sikhs excelled in most sports activities. They were excellent cricketers and hockey players. 4 young Sikh brothers represented Kenya hockey team in the Montreal Olympics in 1972. In the 1930s, a turban-wearing Sikh always won the grass-track motorcycle racing in Nairobi, the competitors being mainly Europeans. It reminds me of the 3 Sikhs, one who was a very calm, steady rider with nerves of steel. He would always win. Another, a dashing, showing one, while riding his motorcycle at great speed, always looked sideways to see if he was being admired. It led to his tragic death. The third would spend weeks streamlining his motorbike in preparation, but would topple over in the very first lap during the competition. In the motorsports, 2 Sikh brothers won the East African Rally several times. On the first occasion, they used a second-hand Volvo, which had done 48,000 miles after modifying for rally conditions, and they finished the rally in first place, 100 minutes ahead of second place. Joginder Singh became known as the Flying Sikh. The East African Rally was counted for World Championship points, and many overseas professional drivers used to partake in it. Pat Moss, the sister of Sterling Moss, was also a regular participant. They established a very warm rapport with Joginder Singh and invited him to participate in a European rally. During that rally, he happened to stop at a checkpoint, and a couple of blonde ladies came running to him in sympathy and asked if he was all right. They thought he was injured and had been heavily bandaged on the head. Turban-wearing Sikhs seem endowed with mysterious aptitude for mechanics. This was common knowledge among the British farming community in Kenya. My hometown of Nakuru was known as the agricultural capital of Kenya, and the farmers, who were Europeans only in those days, would come to do their business on Fridays. Later, after business, they would spend time in a nearby club before returning to their farms in the evening. One evening, a farmer, apparently a little tipsy, struggled to get his car lights on. My brothers happened to be walking by the car park when he desperately signaled for help and pleaded if they could fix his lights. My brothers were in fact only teenagers, but still offered to be good Samaritans. Not knowing much about cars, they fiddled around the dashboard in the dark, and then, hey presto, the lights came on. The grateful farmer gave them 5 shillings. This was in 1938. Another episode about the turban, which is more historical. Prince Shah Shuja, who had acquired the Kohinoor diamond, had it hidden in the folds of his turban. He had enlisted Maharaja Ranjit Singh's help in ousting his brother, who was usurping his rightful place as Afghanistan's ruler. In those days, it was a practice between dignitaries to exchange turbans as a mark of friendship. The Maharaja was craftily aware of the diamond and readily offered to exchange turbans. This thus came to pass the Kohinoor to the Maharaja of Punjab. On annexation of Punjab by the British after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Kohinoor was part of the deal. The diamond is now studied in the late Queen Mother's crown. Amongst the turban Sikhs in Kenya, my father was mentioned in the Kenyan newspapers as a pioneer of the same generation as Lord Delamere and Colonel Grogan. That was early 1900 settlers. My older brother, Pyara Singh was awarded an MBE for his services as an honorary correspondent to the British High Commissioner in Nairobi. My brother and I pioneered aerial cough spraying against coffee berry disease in East Africa. Sikh textile magnate rose from humble beginnings of tailor, was awarded the Silver Star of Kenya by President Moi. It is interesting to note that his company has been supplying to British clothing companies in the UK, such as Debenhams. Several other Sikhs in Kenya have also been recipients of various awards by Her Majesty, the Queen, and also the President of Kenya. There are jokes about the Sikhs. Like the Irish, Sikhs have not escaped being made fun of. This one you have heard in many forms. In India, there was a time when most taxi drivers in Calcutta were Sikhs. To maneuver through the thickly crowded streets was a very skillful job. They would drive through honking their horns as if the pedestrians were a flock of sheep, scattering them away from their path. They in turn exclaimed the name of God for protecting them from the Sikh taxi driver. When one of these drivers died and stood at the gates of heaven, there was also a padri and a rabbi. St. Peter unhesitatingly stood the padri and the rabbi aside for a secondary treatment, but led the Sikh straight through the gates of heaven. At this, the padri and the rabbi remonstrated and said that they had preached God's name throughout their lives. How come mere taxi driver received preferential treatment? St. Peter responded by saying that the Sikh had driven the fear of God's name in so many people that they could not have achieved in their lifetime. There's another cheap joke which I like to tell you. It's about a Sikh cyclist who inadvertently rode through the path of an elderly lady. Just missing her, the lady cursed him and remarked, "You with a long beard, couldn't you stop your cycle?" He responded by saying, "Madam, this is a beard, not a brake." I'd like to thank you for listening to me. I hope the talk has been interesting.
Welcome, fellow traveler. Each of us is on a spiritual journey, which each of us has to travel alone from birth to death in this lifetime. This journey does not necessarily have to depend on whether you believe in God, which religion you belong to, or whether you are a free thinker or a non-thinker, whether you're white, black, or some other color, or which caste, creed, or following you belong to, whether you're a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian. I am a Sikh. I belong to the Sikh faith, and I believe in a creator. Some call this creator God. That is my bias. And every one of us has a right to his or her own bias.